Hey YouTube, welcome back to Love for Crypto. So as promised, the One World Currency documentary that I have been working on relentlessly for the past few months. The research I've been doing, the rabbit holes I have been down, and I've come back onto the surface, questioning my own sanity at times, questioning is this really happening? But with the compelling evidence, the documented facts, the statements from credible whistleblowers and insiders from the BIS, the CIA, it all leads to the same goal and the same end game, and it is a new world order supplemented by a one world currency. Now this documentary, if you are not into the cryptocurrency realm, if you do not follow it and you've just stumbled across this video, please drop a subscribe to the channel. I can guarantee you by the end of this video your mind will be blown, and what the reality is that you could have the biggest investment opportunity laid before your eyes and not even know about it. So this documentary is going to involve the deep state, the shadow government, the NSA, the CIA, the central banking system, the Federal Reserve, the IMF, cryptocurrencies, digital assets. It sounds crazy, it sounds ludicrous, I completely understand, and that is why I've had to go to such extent to create such a documentary where I can compel and compress all of the facts that I have stumbled across upon the past 5 to 6 months. First of all, I would just like to ask for your patience throughout this video. As you can see, it is quite lengthy, but again, the information inside this video is priceless. There is going to be lots of different videos from different content creators added inside this video just to give you a better overall visualization of exactly what is happening on a geopolitical level worldwide today. But first of all, before we continue to move forwards, we need to go back to where the elites first planted the seed, and that is in the 2008 financial crisis. There is a video compressed of various different media clips from the 2008 financial crisis, which I'm about to show you, and I please ask for you to take away and keep hold of this information, because at the back end of this documentary it will become relevant why I've asked this. So without further ado,
we're in the money, we're in the money, we've got a lot of what it takes to get along, we're in the money.
Apple's up more than 6% right now, Google about 3%, but Dell, Intel, Research Motion, and Microsoft are all to the upside. Look how strong.
Did not disappoint. 400 points higher. Yes, indeed. The markets roar higher last 30 minutes of trading as volatility once again rules the day.
Most of the techs this morning, if not all of them, have just exploded to the upside. We are better than 5% to the upside at NASDAQ, 114.
Down here about there being no bell. Our market
from 190 to 166 in the blink of an eye.
I have never live looked at the Dow Jones Industrial Board and seen a 600-point loss.
Who knows where this is going to end up? I mean, this is volatility we haven't seen, of course, since way before you and I were born, even before our grandparents, 1929.
So almost everything there completely wiped out. And the NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
The Dow traders are standing there watching in amazement, and I don't blame them. The credit market...
676 points down.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
From the financial capital of the world, the opening bell is going to ring
in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
Traders here working the phone say a lot of their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go. They're focused on the Dow, not so focused on OPEC. Yes, OPEC did cut production by 1.5 million barrels per day.
Really, you're seeing just broad-based declines across all of the major technology sectors. Apple's under pressure, Yahoo down 8.5%, Cisco 6.5%, Research in Motion 10%.
And we're not getting the bid wanted. We're not getting the stop trading, and we see where the buyers are. We're just every day they're pounding it.
The heightened financial turmoil that we have experienced of late may well lengthen the period of weak economic performance and further increase the risk to growth.
Can't look at it after you buy it. It's so horrible.
We haven't seen anything like this probably since the Great Depression, I think it's fair to say.
We've had an 8-day losing streak in the Dow that in percentage terms puts it on par, close to the loss suffered in that crash in 1987, close to that percentage loss those 2 days in 1929.
Look at the move in Aussie yen just this week. This was 1 week, Maria. This market took 5 years to go higher. It's now down 40%.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
We're down 9% today. The Xetra DAX over in Frankfurt is down by 9%. The Paris market down by 9%. Austria, which was briefly suspended earlier on in the day, is down by nearly 11%.
This market is as volatile as you'll ever see.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it. The movement in oil prices so fast, so furious.
Cicero was right. We're in the last days of this country surviving. And how in the world can we find the billions of dollars that we're borrowing from China and Japan?
We are just seconds to go until the start of trading at the New York Stock Exchange, and stocks are set to kick off lower, a whole lot lower.
eBay is down 6.5%, and really you're seeing just broad-based declines across all of the major technology sectors. Apple's under pressure, Yahoo down 8.5%, Cisco 6.5%, Research in Motion 10%.
So, as you can see, that was the 2008 financial crisis. It is those type of crisis where you will see fund managers throwing themselves out of high-story buildings because of the capital that has been lost. Now, that was a debt crisis built upon subprime mortgages, a housing bubble that occurred into the United States, which spread worldwide. Now, just before we continue, that issue was never resolved. Let's just get that out there right now. The issue was never resolved. A simple band-aid was put on top of a gunshot wound. That is the only remedy that was solved. It was not repaired, it was postponed. That was 2008. That was an $8 trillion problem. Now the US is in 22 trillion worth of debt 10 years since that financial crisis. What does that tell you as a person? Nothing was resolved. The central banks intervened and they delayed the inevitable. The Federal Reserve's tactic to combat this debt bubble that had occurred was to lower interest rates to near 0%, whilst hyperinflating the exact same debt bubble that caused the problem to begin with by printing and printing and printing ridiculous amounts of US dollars to bail out the banking system. But that's not the reason why we are going over this. The reason was the creation of Bitcoin. The reason was Satoshi's white paper. The banks destroyed the credibility of themselves. They lost the vote of confidence within society, and thus Bitcoin was born. Down with the banks, down with the governments. Let's take the power from the banks and put it into our own pockets with a cryptography designed algorithmic base that would prevent any one entity from having control of your money. Now, why was this correlation so important at this time? Because the two fit hand in hand perfect. As Winston Churchill once says, never let a good crisis go to waste. And that's exactly what the elites planned on doing here by introducing Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Now, as far-fetched as this may seem, and I realise it seems far-fetched, you know, Bitcoin was created to take down the man, not to aid the man. I can fully understand people's mind frames on that situation, but the elites have regained control of the monetary system for decades, for centuries. And it's not by mistake, it is by design. Now, again, that debt crisis has only grown ever since. The debt crisis we are experiencing today is quite frankly beyond comparison to what happened in 2008. If you thought that was bad, then what is coming is just, there's just no correlation in magnitude of how small 2008 will appear to the next financial crisis. But again, Bitcoin was created. Satoshi Nakamoto, the face that has never been seen, the entity that has never been witnessed. There is no trace, there is no proof of who this man is. There's many theories, many speculative claims around the creation of Bitcoin and its creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. And I can understand when I say it's the elite's plan to introduce Bitcoin, when Bitcoin was actually in fact developed to bring down the elites. That's what they want you to believe. And you may be saying to yourself, well, how can you prove this now? How can a simple YouTuber sat behind a screen tell me that it was a secret service design all along? Well, the compelling evidence I'm about to show you should hopefully settle any doubt you have in your mind moving forwards. Before I do present this information, the credibility behind what I have just spoke about Bitcoin being the creation of the elites, not the weapon to dispose of them. First, we actually need to understand how the elites work, how they operate, how they've manipulated the masses for decades, if not centuries, and how they do this every single time with success, again, by design. Now, I've done a lot of research into a man named Kevin Shipp, who is a former CIA operative. He's come out against the CIA. He's been a whistleblower in the same regards as Edward Snowden has. And I think this man himself will better illustrate to yourself how exactly the elites work and how they operate. And you need to be able to grasp exactly the truth of the elites and how they actually are the entity that control the direction of the world financially and diplomatically. So, what I have for you here is a clip from Kevin Shipp. Now, I advise you go and check him out on YouTube. He has his own page. He has around 8 hours worth of information. Again, I can't put all that into this documentary. I would be here forever, but I have taken out a very key, integral aspect of one of his speeches that fits the one world currency conspiracy, if you would like to call it. But I do believe after you have watched this clip of Kevin Shipp, you will truly grasp how powerful the elites actually are. So, without further ado.
The shadow government and the deep state are not the same thing. You hear people say this, well, the deep state is after Donald Trump because they're holdovers from the Obama administration that are penetrators into the CIA and others. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a smokescreen. I'll show you that the shadow government is not leftover Obama people. It is a matrix system that has functioned across every single administration going back to JFK, Republican and Democrats alike. So the shadow government is the secret part of government. The CIA, the NSA, and I'll show you a host of other secret intelligence agencies that are part of the shadow government. It functions through the unbridled, unconstitutional power of secrecy. That's the shadow government. Beneath the shadow government is what you hear a lot of talk about. It's called the deep state. Now, the deep state is this massive financial, multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar matrix that includes the military-industrial complex all of you probably have heard about. I'll shed a little bit more light on that. The deep state functions in the same matrix connected to the shadow government, but much of the time the shadow government rules the deep state through the power of secrecy. Secrecy agreements, the state secrets privilege, and other things. So they are intimately connected in running our government behind the scenes. They manipulate our elected government behind the scenes. Now that is a dramatic statement. I think by the end of tonight, I'm going to prove to you that it's going on. I saw it personally. There's a lot of things I can't talk about. I have to watch everything I say, honestly. For the last 15 years, they've just been waiting for me to make one mistake. I haven't made it yet. So let's talk about this, the shadow government and the deep state. Deep state is run by money, power, and greed. That's what runs the deep state. The shadow government, their fuel is fear and intimidation. Here's the shadow or secret government, the unconstitutional power of government secrecy. I'm going to show you the components of the secret government, many of them that function outside the Constitution. The Director of National Intelligence has 17 intelligence agencies underneath him at this point that process 90 to 100,000 bits of classified information a day, some of which should not be classified. You've got the Department of Homeland Security, secret agencies there. You've got the Department of State. Hillary Clinton ran guns into Benghazi secretly using Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Most people don't know that. She did it through the secret system. You got the Defense Intelligence Agency that engaged in the torture program. Some people died. They also tried to recruit American citizens to be informants within the United States. I mean, this is, folks, this is an 8-hour lecture, so I'm going to have to pack some of this in there because there's just so much here. But anyway, you got the National Reconnaissance Office that runs the satellite program, all the birds that are up there, and there is a bunch of them. You have the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the big secret agency that worked with Google through a big contract and set up Google Earth. So Google worked with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency through CIA In-Q-Tel to set up Google Earth. So you think it's only Google watching you? It's not. Sadly, Silicon Valley has been recruited by the shadow government. Let's move. JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. Most people don't know about it, but this is the president's secret army. The president of the United States has his own secret army, special operators that he sends on presidential order into foreign countries in secret to engage in killings, overturning governments, and things that the American people don't know about. It's a secret force. Then you've got the FBI conducting warrantless searches, national security letters where they come into your business and order your supervisor to turn over all of your financial records, and if he or she says anything about them being there, they put your supervisor in jail. Violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now I'm going to talk specifically tonight, because this is so vast, about I consider the two top tiers of what I call the shadow government or the secret government. The first of that is the National Security Agency. Heard a lot about them, haven't we? I'm working with William Binney, the NSA whistleblower who blew the whistle on the NSA surveillance program, house raided by a SWAT team, a gun put to his head. We'll talk about the NSA a little bit. I'm going to focus on what I call the central node of the shadow government, an unconstitutional agency that used to be my life. And I was a senior managing supervisor there in counterintelligence and other things I'll talk about later. It is this one right here. That is the node, the central node of the shadow government, functions outside the Constitution through the power of secrecy, and not even Congress knows everything that it's doing. Is there a constitutional problem with that? You better believe there is. I'll show you exactly how bad that is. The CIA was created through the Council on Foreign Relations, which started back in 1921. They were instrumental in creating the CIA. The CFR was, and back when the CFR created the CIA, they were tied directly into guess who? The mainstream media. The owners of the Washington Post, the Grahams, were ranking members of the Council on Foreign Relations. The CIA was feeding information directly into the Washington Post. Philip and Catherine Graham were publishing stories that the CIA had told them to study. Now, in the long, wonderful history of the Washington Post, who owns the Washington Post now? Jeff Bezos of Amazon. What did he just do? He entered into a $6 million contract with guess who? The CIA. So the circle continues. I could spend an hour on the mainstream media's connection to intelligence. Sadly, we don't have that time. But just understand that the CFR was instrumental in creating the CIA. They were directly connected to the mainstream media, and the Washington Post, New York Times, CBS, and others that were feeding information directly to the CIA to be published to alter the opinions of the American people. Okay, we'll just leave that there for now. The deep state, let's talk about what makes up the deep state. Underneath, if you can see, I put the deep state underneath the shadow government, because the shadow government is this powerful monolith outside the Constitution. Much of the deep state, the military-industrial complex, is not violating the Constitution, but they are controlling our elected officials. Okay, so there's a little bit difference, but they are connected pretty intimately. In that, you've got the military-industrial complex. Everybody's heard about that probably. What you haven't heard is Eisenhower originally called it the military-industrial congressional complex, because Congress is tied in so deeply with the military-industrial complex and the deep state that they manipulate what the congressmen and senators do and how they vote, and I will prove that tonight. So Congress is just as tied into the military-industrial complex as Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and the others are. Who is the main representative in our government of the people? Congress, right? If they own Congress, we don't have a vote or a voice anymore, and that's the idea. All right, let's go through some of them. They own the intelligence contractors, the defense contractors. We're talking billions of dollars here in revenue that comes from your taxes. The military-industrial complex, about $4.8 million a year is spent by military-industrial complex, the lobbyists, to influence Congress and put money into their PACs, leadership PACs, re-election campaigns, and others, to the tune of $4 or $5 million a year. Huge impact on Congress. There's foreign lobbyists. Saudi Arabia and Israel might as well have a congressional slot on Capitol Hill. They are so influential on our government that they actually have a serious impact on political decisions in Washington. You've got the Federal Reserve, the secret bank that just gave out a couple $1 trillion to some unknown corporations in the military-industrial complex that they won't tell anybody about because their deliberations are secret. With whose money? With our money. So the Federal Reserve is tied in with this. We've got Wall Street. Wall Street funds all of this, the military-industrial complex. Wall Street is so plugged in to the military-industrial complex and the shadow government. It was Wall Street attorneys that formed the CIA. Wall Street has been in the shadow government and the deep state going back to 1947. So they're a part of the deep state. You've got the central banks connected to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is connected to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank because the CFR's stated goal was eventually and still is an economic global government. And they're merging through special drawing rights into digital currency eventually. And that's where that started.
So, as you've just heard from the man himself, and I do give this man extremely high credibility in what he is saying. Again, this was just a small clip which is relevant to this documentary, but I do ask yourselves to please go and search for Kevin Shipp. That's Kevin and Shipp spelled S-H-I-P-P. He does have a YouTube channel. He does have 8 hours worth of content, and he goes into specifically how powerful the elites actually are. And we're talking shadow government, we're talking the deep state, and again, as you have heard him say, the Federal Reserve, the central banks, the IMF, and they have one goal, and the goal still remains the same today. It is for a one world governance, a one world currency. If you listen very carefully towards the end of that clip, and if you did miss it, I ask you to go and have a look and listen back over it again. He does say that they want a one world currency which will merge through the SDR baskets into digital currencies. Now again, this is a credible person from the CIA who is whistleblowing on the CIA for specific reasons. The CIA did try to kill his wife and kids, and hence this is why he's come out in protection of those who do want to whistleblow, who shows that it can be done without being executed or silenced. So yeah, that clip from Kevin Shipp for me, it's extremely important to take away that information. As it does claim the CFR, which create the CIA, the NSA, how Wall Street are all interconnected with the Federal Reserve, the central banks, the IMF. The entire system is interconnected. That is something that you need to realise. And we see this happening in the markets of cryptocurrency today. We see hardcore downward pressure manipulation from the likes of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, etc., who are playing down the markets the exact same way they have done in the past. Mainstream media being used as a tool, as a weapon to serve their narrative. And again, we have seen Bitcoin being manipulated to the ground. The precious metal markets, again, gold and silver, are being pressured down. The markets are being pressured down for specific reasons. And it's to continue the cycle that we are currently experiencing, which is a product and by design a debt bubble which is ready to implode. Now, there is good reason to believe that market's being played down for specific reasons. Is it so insiders can be well positioned before the inevitable happens? There's a lot of speculation around that aspect, but I want to try and remain on vocal point with this documentary, which is obviously ushering in the one world currency. Now, that was Kevin Shipp from the CIA. I have another piece of information that I'm about to show you right now, and this is a former Bank of International Settlements figure who again has come out, he's spoken truths, and I just find it absolutely fascinating, and I believe you will find fascinating yourselves what you are about to hear, again from a credible source. So I will show you this clip.
You are pioneering precisely because you did transmute that experience into some beautiful chemistry.
But the problem is it's still there. It's daily there. And people, I don't know, people are not aware. People have to wake up.
Let's talk about the soul contract. Let's talk about the soul compact and covenant that we engage.
You know, with this third sample, search for it. All the world leaders are already calling for it for many years. The new world order, their new world order. That's the program. It's combined with the finance system to have us completely slaved, without of cash, all digital, to put us in a digital cave, completely, deciding if they like you or not.
Ah, but they never thought about cryptocurrencies and blockchain, did they?
They did.
You believe that they're engineering all of that? You don't believe that is a natural human organic response to central banking and fiat? Is crypto and smart contracts is our way of throwing this devil off the back?
Even on the internet you can find a white paper from the NSA from 1995. They were already describing everything you have now in present, like cryptocurrencies. It's the first and the second generation of cryptocurrencies. They have a lot of backdoors. They are not free. I'm very happy and aware that step by step, people start to choose different.
Right.
But about the cryptocurrencies, it was all created by Secret Services. Now, in the third and the fourth generations, people are taking the tools to use it in a positive way.
Very good.
So there are positive things going, but my reaction was more in the direction of in general, the masses, the billions of people.
Yes.
Who are still have no clue.
And just follow whatever.
Yeah, and they have no clue about anything because they are children. They have the inner child and they have children of their own. And we have to take care of this with all the people who are able to do this.
Ronald,
so as you can see, the elites are trying to enslave the populace by removing the current monetary system that we have in play, which is the petrodollar, which, as you can see, is creating a contagion of debt-riddled issues globally, and they want to transfer all of this wealth into digital assets. Now, they don't specifically say which digital asset has been chosen, but if you follow Ripple and XRP, and especially going back on what I've talked about up until this point in regards of the deep state, in regards of the IMF, in regards of the NSA, central banks, Federal Reserve, which company is working with all of these entities as we speak currently today, improving financial payment systems, creating a new form of liquidity, which, may I add, when the financial markets do collapse, liquidity will be the greatest. And when I say the greatest issue that will follow will be the liquidity. There will be no liquidity. As the Federal Reserve starts to increase rates with quantitative tightening, it will dry the liquidity of the financial markets, which will be masterfully masterminded and architected in such a way that liquidity will be the real key driver of failure. Now, as we've just heard from an insider from the Bank of International Settlements, in fact, he was working for them rather than an insider. He's obviously left the organisation since. And we've heard from the CIA. They both have compelling stories to tell, each to their own. Again, you'd have to go and look into these figures themselves. I've just used basically the most basic of statements from themselves, obviously just to use for this documentary. As you can appreciate, there is a lot of information. And like I say, I'm just trying to make this into a digestible piece where you can sort of get the overall picture of what exactly is happening here. But again, those are two compelling pieces of information. And more importantly, as it was stated in the Bank of International Settlements figure, they say, is blockchain not the answer to the central banking problem through the central banking debt that they have created worldwide contagion of? You know, there've been easy money been printed out from central banks at zero interest rates, but now all that money does need to come and be paid back. And when the Federal Reserve start the tightening process, which they already are doing, then you will soon see that all of this easy money that has been borrowed in emerging markets, been borrowed on the cheap interest rates, is starting to turn. And we can see this as already, you know, the contagion is already spreading worldwide as we speak, as this documentary is being made. So far then, in this documentary, we've covered the financial crisis of 2008, thus the birth of Bitcoin, or so they wanted you to believe, as I did state earlier. Now, I've shown you exactly who Deep State and the shadow government are, the two and two combined together. The NSA, the CIA created from the CFR, it is all one big interconnected network of elite. And that's how it is. Now, I told you before, I've shown you the two figures who've spoken, one from the CIA and one from the Bank of International Settlements. And I'm hoping by this point, you can actually grasp that there may be some foundation to what I am saying when I claim that Bitcoin and blockchain and cryptocurrencies is in fact an NSA design. And what you are seeing right before your eyes is a 1996 white paper dictating and explaining everything that we see today in blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Satoshi Nakamoto is a masked person. Nobody knows who he is, where he came from, his credentials, his background, his history. He is a ghost in the system. He does not exist. Now, this is 2008, again, the perfect setup to introduce such a technology. If the elites was to roll out this technology to the masses, making the masses aware of what the technology was, the people would not adopt their technology. But deceitfully, yet again, the elites have come on top and manipulated the masses into adopting their very own technology. And that is the conception that people seem and people fail to even give attention to. They believe Satoshi Nakamoto's the saviour, the big ultimate battle against the central bank system, when in fact it was their design to begin with. Now, what I am showing you right this moment is a pattern for a distributed ledger technology, and as you can see, the pattern is from 1988. Now, prior to this information, I've shown you a NSA white paper for blockchain and cryptocurrencies from 1996, which is obviously 8 years afterwards from the pattern that I am showing today. Now, the pattern I am showing you right now is from the one and the only David Schwartz. So as you can see, David is a very intellectual person. He works for the NSA, and this is documented facts that even Ripple themselves, which I am showing you now, have listed for their network of staff. And as you can see, it clearly states that David Schwartz was working for the NSA, building cryptographic solutions on their behalf. Now, this is a direct link to Ripple in what I am speaking to you about today. David Schwartz is an integral part, an integral key in what I am trying to speak and trying to let you, as the population, understand. So we have the NSA, we have David Schwartz, we have cryptocurrencies, which is an NSA designed to begin with. We have Bitcoin, which was to get the masses on board with the technology, to get them on board with blockchain, to help them devise and use it as a tool of their own accord. David Schwartz has come from the NSA. He's now employed by Ripple. Now, I'm not trying to link David Schwartz with the New World Order. I'm just simply piecing together information that we have available in the public domain that we can try and connect dots together with. Now, finally, before we do move forwards, there is a man named Arthur Britto, who is the co-founder of Ripple, who's the co-founder of Polysign, which is a custodian service, which is something which will be held of high value moving forwards into the future. Custody is where the key lies in holding digital assets in a secure manner. Now, again, Arthur Britto, as I mentioned, was a co-founder of Ripple, but again, he is another masked person. He has no academic background, he has no photographs online, he has no history. Nobody has seen the man, only claims to have spoken to the man. But up until this day, as a co-founder of Ripple, I find it highly suspicious why they are not crediting him with any of his work that he participated towards the development of Ripple and the XRPL. He's a ghost, the same ghost as that Satoshi is. Hey, who is Satoshi? Who is Arthur Britto? They are two dominant and predominant people in this environment today who we do have no information for whatsoever. That alone raises eyebrows, it raises alarm bells. I mean, come on, people, we're talking about revolutionary technology created by entities where we have no recollection of where they came from. If that does not sound like Secret Service to you, then I do not know what Secret Service. They are secret for a reason. They move in ways where the public will never know in how they have moved. Now, we've had two predominant speakers from the CIA and from the International Bank of Settlements, the BIS, who have clearly spoke about a one world order, a one world currency. They've clearly stated it is a Secret Service development, and yet the two people, Arthur Britto and Satoshi, the people who have created a revolution, to this day are not present. They're not seen, they're not heard. There is no background, there is no academic of them, there is nothing on the internet for them. I find that personally highly suspicious on its own. So I think that point was just definitely worth raising. So we will now move forward onto our next sequence in this documentary. And just before we leave this topic about Arthur Britto, as you can see in front here, this is one of the blocks created on XRPL long time ago. Was Arthur Britto drip feeding us clues about what the true purpose of XRPL was designed for. So far in this documentary, all we have heard is conspiracy and possibilities of what might actually happen moving forwards. But in this chapter, I'm going to show you people, the president himself, the managing director of the IMF, alongside with documented facts of exactly where this technology is leading us, from the World Bank to the Federal Reserve to SWIFT, which is the money processor of the planet, transferring over $6 trillion per 24 hours in volume. Now, again, as I stated, up until this point, it has been mere speculation and conspiracy. But in this chapter, I'm going to show you facts and speeches where we are ushering in the one world currency. So first of all, this is Kevin's story. And what he's explaining is the current status of the United States dollar acting as a reserve currency. Now, in order for the US dollar to first be removed as the reserve, we need conditions set in place that will help aid this process in as being as much as a smooth transaction as possible. So this clip here will help you understand in small detail about the monetary reset and also how they plan in executing the monetary reset.
14 signs pointing to the global currency reset, and just to cover this area of the one of the signs that we believe there's a big negotiations going on behind the scene to restructure the world's financial system. And these have been going on for years, maybe even some decades, and that this restructuring is taking place and is being put in place and is being accomplished. But the things that we can look for certain signs that it's about to happen, because these are the things that would be happening if we had a global currency reset. One is we would see the US dollar diminished as a global reserve currency. The United States has been handling that the world does 64% of its total volume of business in the US dollar. And so the US dollar is a reserve currency, like several other currencies are reserve currencies, but it is the global reserve currency, the principal global reserve currency. So what we would see is that would be happening. Why? Because they're beginning to bring in China and other nations into the economic world system, and when they do that, we have to decrease because they're going to increase. And so we would see a diminishing of the global reserve currency. But in order to do that, that would in itself would just hurt everything, because why? We need that currency. So what we have to do simultaneously is a new currency has to replace it, and that is going to be the SDR, special drawing rights from the IMF, is going to be introduced as a part of the replacement for the USD. And so we have the SDR being released. So we're watching for signs that the SDR is increasing in the number of deals and people using it and all of that. And we will see that if this is happening, we'll see that happening. Then.
So as you can see, in order for the US dollar to give up its reserve status, we need to increase demand in other forms of currency. Now, a lot of you won't understand what SDR basket means at this point, and we will cover this a little bit later on into the documentary. But moving forward, we are now going to turn to more credible and more high-seated officials in the monetary system. And first of all, we're going to go to President Trump himself. And if you listen very carefully and read between the lines, I'm sure you will grasp exactly the point he's making in this speech.
I had a very, very good conversation, as most of you know, yesterday with the president of China. It was a very, very warm conversation. I think we are on the process of getting along very well, and I think that will also be very much of a benefit to Japan. So we had a very, very good talk last night and discussed a lot of subject. It was a long talk, and we are working on that as we speak. We have conversations with various representatives of China. I believe that will all work out very well for everybody, China, Japan, the United States, and everybody in the region. As far as the currency devaluations, I've been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe that we will all eventually, and probably very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think, we will be all at a level playing field, because that's the only way it's fair. That's the only way that you can fairly compete in trade and other things. And we will be on that field, and we will all be working very hard to do great for our country. But it has to be fair, and we will make it fair.
So you have heard it from the President of the United States, who clearly states himself he's been complaining about the currency devaluations for a long time. And when we say this, today it appears to be even more relevant when you look at the likes of Argentina and Turkey and other various emerging markets, Russia, China, all the currencies are being devaluated as we speak. And this is something that cannot continue, and this is something that is happening because of the United States dollar acting as the world reserve. Now you can see yourself from the president, who clearly states that things will be changing and it will happen a lot sooner than people may realise. Now, is this the grand scheme that the elites have been planning? Is this going to be the monetary reset that we hear about of numerous economists worldwide? Well, we have some other further compelling evidence as well to show you, which will support this theory. At this point, we will turn to Lynette at ITM Trading. Please, if you do not follow her, give her a subscription on YouTube. She has a lot of detail, and she's a person who is keeping a close eye on this monetary reset, and she will help aid you in gaining the information you need to see. So without further ado, I hand you over to Zanette, who will talk to us about how the monetary reset is on the horizon and has taken a step up in it being more of a reality than a myth.
Specializing and focused on developing strategies to help you through the reset that we're already in process of. And today we're going to talk more about what's happening in the emerging markets, because quite frankly, in my opinion, with the contagion, we have now gone to a new level in the fiat money reset. And so it's really important to understand what supports this whole fiat money system. And we know that it's based on the full faith and credit of the government. In other words, the confidence, you have to have confidence in the government and in the central banks to repay that debt, or you have some problems. And they are having problems in droves in the emerging markets. Now, we've been talking, and the links are below to the 2 previous videos that I've done on this emerging market issue. But we have ratcheted up to a new phase with a full 13 different currencies, fiat currencies, that are now participating in this route. So even Wall Street is recognizing the contagion. Now, the problem is, and you can see, this is Argentina, this is the Turkish lira, but the South African rand is at the worst August on record. The Indian rupee has hit fresh lows. The Indonesian rupiah falls to Asian crisis levels. That's back in the 90s. And all of these currencies are participating in Hong Kong and in China. And what do the central bankers have to fight this currency devaluation route? Oh my goodness, they have interest rates. So we now have Argentina that has the world's highest levels of interest rates at 60%. But what does that really mean? Well, who really manages the money? Money managers, Wall Street, bankers, people that work with other people's money. And the theory is that if they pay you enough interest, you'll ignore the risk to your principal. Think about that. See if you've actually done that. Because most people are coming, or many people anyway, are coming to these videos because they want to get a better understanding of the global economy and how each country is interconnected. And that's what we're looking at with this contagion. Why would you risk your principal giving it to a country that you absolutely know cannot pay you back just for that interest that they also probably can't ultimately pay? It doesn't make sense. But if you're working with other people's money, does it really matter that you're taking that risk to the principal? Because at the end of the day, as we experienced in 2008, when the markets implode, there is nothing you can do about it. So what I really want to talk to you right now is what's happening in this next phase. Emerging markets are, the stock markets along with the currency markets are all plummeting. What is the stock created from? Fiat currency. So in the US, we've entered the melt up phase. But frankly, as I've shown you before, the purchasing power of not just the dollar, but actually all fiat money by design is losing value. So the emerging markets are really facing a double whammy. Not only is their currency weakening against the US dollar, so relative, and I'm going to show you why that matters in just a second, but their stock markets are imploding, a double whammy. Now, do you think that maybe, well, I don't really care because I don't think I have any emerging markets? I'd double check that if I were you. And let me show you why I actually say that. Because what we've got going on here is the growth of a new product area for Wall Street. What I want to point out is this is local currency debt, and you can see how much that's grown since 92. This is U.S. currency debt. This is debt that emerging markets took out in terms of U.S. dollars when the dollar was so much cheaper. We've talked about this quite a bit over the years. This is where we were at by the end of this, so that's even grown. More debt. And all of that new debt, as we know, that is how money is created in the current system, has created the emerging market equities, their stock market explosion. Those have been turned into products, MSCI products, and put into ETFs. They're ETFs on their own, derivative products, etc. They are inside of all sorts of things, like stock markets and bond markets, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, pensions, any kind of product that has a mutual fund and ETF inside of it. Most likely, you're going to need to double check on this, but most likely has a lot of exposure to the emerging markets, which Wall Street has been pushing quite intensely, as you can see. But at the same time, the risk has also grown. This is from an IMF report showing the level of distress in the emerging markets. And look at this. This red is high risk. This black is in distress. And look at how much that has expanded as we're told that the global economy is doing so well. Not here. Now, you might think that that really doesn't matter, but quite honestly, yeah, that's not really true. And what's happening, because in globalism, this all has to do with globalism. I remember them talking quite a bit about it in the 80s when I first became a stockbroker. And I thought, that's really not so good. But what they've done since then is they've created what they call a global value chain. And what that really did was it enabled corporations to look around the world and see where they could buy the cheapest labor. And then they went in, and that's exactly what they did. So it pushed the corporate costs down and it exported deflation in wages. I mean, this is a big reason why we've had stagnant wage growth, because we didn't need to have explosive wage growth. I mean, why are we at one of the lowest levels of employment ever? And we can see that in many places around the world, and yet wages have not risen. Well, that's perfect for corporations because their products prices have gone up. That's how they gauge inflation. But wages have been stagnant. So because of that, you have this huge growth in global populism, which threatens the whole system and this global value chain. But what this value chain did by enabling corporations to go and buy that labor so cheaply, it actually hid a lot of the devaluation from the public that was actually happening to the currencies, even as wages were stagnant. Now look, at some point, you always have to pay the piper. And it appears that the piper is going to get paid now, because much of this debt, and this chart shows you the importing of the parts and components, and then the gold part up here shows you the exporting of the finished goods. So that creates a lot of cross-border dependency, but also cross-border contamination when things go very wrong, like we're seeing with the currency implosion in these different emerging markets. So where once they were able to hide this devaluation, now this very mechanism that they've been building since the 80s is likely to spread or transmit that global inflation. And once that kicks into gear rapidly, it happens as fast as that. So that's also why with the advent of the trade wars and the protectionism, I'm thinking, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm thinking that this could be used to justify the inflation that the whole globe is about to experience, which of course then will usher in the ultimate reset. But make no mistake about it, part of what's happening, and that's why I said that the central bank dominoes are starting to fall. In many cases, the measures that central banks have taken to try and support their currencies are being completely ignored by the market. The market's not listening to them anymore. Now, it happens to be in the emerging market region, and that piece is not yet happening in all 13 countries that are being impacted by this, but it is definitely happening in most of them, and that is spreading. So what happens when it comes home? Wherever home might be for you in this world, it will be coming home. We're all one big global family. And since it's that confidence in the central banks and the system that is maintaining things even where they are right now. They lose confidence, they lose everything. And that's the big problem. Central bankers have been concerned about this loss of confidence since the crisis. So they've been working voraciously to transfer risk from Wall Street to Main Street. Do they have enough of that risk transferred? We're going to find out, because it'll happen. We'll know about it. It'll be noticeable either when they've transferred enough risk or they lose control. This is telling me that the day of them losing control is upon us now. That's why I said I believe that we have gone to the next level in this global financial system reset, starting in the emerging markets. This is really huge. Keep in mind, China is part of that.
So that was Lynette from ITM Trading. Again, if you don't follow her on YouTube, she's definitely worth a subscription. She's keeping a close eye on how things are developing in the economy, and as you just heard, she's a very intelligent woman who can help guide you through this process. So without quite going into the doom and gloom of what is upcoming, I still need to make you all aware that we are being prepared for this from even the highest figures in financial industries. Again, we've just heard from the president, but now we're going to concentrate more on the IMF. And remember, from back at the start of this documentary, you should now know who the IMF really are and who they answer to. So I'm going to pass you over to Christine Larange, who's the managing director of the IMF. There's going to be a couple of clips here that I've gathered for you, but again, it just shows that they really are preparing the world for the upcoming rise of digital assets. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to a few clips of Christine.
Taking risk is in not watching, in not understanding. And yes, there are frauds, and there are speculations, and there are Ponzi schemes. But I think we should just beware of not categorizing anything that has to do with digital currencies in those speculation Ponzi-like schemes. It's a lot more than that as well. We are about to see massive disruptions. The way in which the new technologies are lowering the cost to make financial transactions more accessible, even in very small numbers, for people who do not earn much, who do not deposit much, and who do not borrow much, and how those technologies can actually have a track record of the credit history of somebody in a very short while, and then be able to direct those people towards the best use of their money, I think is already massively disruptive.
So in many ways, virtual currencies might just give existing currencies and monetary policy a run for their money. The best response by central bankers is to continue running effective monetary policy while being open to fresh ideas, new demands, new technologies as economies and technologies evolve. So while I completely agree with Minouche that you don't swim twice in the same water, yet you have to be aware that the waters are likely to change, and central banks have to adapt to those changes. And yet, why might citizens hold virtual currencies rather than those physical dollars, physical euros, or physical sterlings? Because it may one day be easier and safer than obtaining paper bills, especially in remote regions, and because virtual currencies could actually become more stable. Instead, citizens may one day prefer virtual currencies, since they potentially offer the same cost and convenience as cash, no settlement risks, no clearing delays, no central registration, no intermediary to check accounts and identities. If privately issued currencies remain risky and unstable, citizens may even call on central banks to provide digital forms of legal tender. So when the new service economy comes knocking on the Bank of England's door, will you welcome it inside? Will you serve tea? Or will you offer financial liquidity? Or all of the above?
Christine, I wanted to ask you to say a bit more about the role of the IMF's special drawing rights. In the original vision of Keynes and Bretton Woods, they thought that the SDR would play a much bigger role in the international monetary system. Do you think the digital age creates an opportunity to rethink the role of the SDR as an international currency?
You know, this is really open territory here, because it has been around for a long time. There were high expectations. There were actually issuance in special drawing rights for a period of time. Then it was abandoned. There was a pickup lately after the renminbi was included in the basket of currencies. Has it been a massive pickup? No. I think the digital platform and the distributed ledger technologies can actually facilitate something which will otherwise be of a political nature. And I think if the two were to come together, the digital acceleration and facilitation and the geopolitical situation that would be propitious to relying on an alternative basket of currencies that would not be a substitute for existing international currency is, so she says with a question mark. But I think we would need the two together. It's not a far-fetched hypothetical, and I believe that at the fund we just have to be ready for that should the circumstances arise that would facilitate the whole process.
Should the circumstances arise that would facilitate the whole process. Please bear this in mind and keep this locked into your head for the time being, because it is very, very relevant at the very end of this documentary. Again, this chapter is just about preparation, but please take that very key piece of information with you. Again, this is Christine Lagrange, the Managing Director of the IMF. You know, we're talking about the International Monetary Fund, probably one of the most prestigious monetary institutions out there in the world today. And as I say, it's a very, very key, important piece of information that you definitely need to make sure that you take with you as you do lead to the very end of this documentary. And again, we keep hearing the same acronym, which is the SDR basket. Now, again, I did say we will go into this. We're going to leave this specific topic for the very, very end of the documentary, because there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of different opinions on exactly what the SDR is, what it can be used for, and what it will be used for in the future. But the SDR, as you keep hearing, will be used in correlation with digital assets. According to Christine Lagrange, it doesn't seem as far-fetched. And if you can remember, Kevin Shipp, who was the CIA operative, he actually uses the acronym SDR, which stands for Special Drawing Rights, and he uses this as the key integration for moving from the current monetary system that we have into the future monetary system that will be. So this next piece that I'm about to show you, in my eyes, was a real confirmation on my part of exactly what Ripple and XRP is geared up to be. I mean, obviously, the technology is unquestionable of what it can achieve, but I do think people are just isolating it to remittance, when I believe the overall picture is on a completely different playing field than just remittance. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass you over to the lifeboats. It's Sam I Am on Twitter, and he actually found some excellent piece of evidence issued from the World Bank. It was a confidential document that has since been released to the open public. It's probably the best way of putting it. But again, credit to Sam I Am and to the lifeboats on this video in particular. I think it is his best video, and I'll just pass you straight over to him.
Ripple me this, riddle me that. Wait. It's marked confidential. Don't release that. Hi folks, I'm Sam I Am, and man, have I got something incredible to share with you in this video. We're going to start, I'm just going to jump in. We're going to start by understanding this term supranational. Now, this was a new term for me. I've brought it up here on Investopedia. Supranational is an organization that is an international group or union in which the power and influence of member states transcend national boundaries or interests to share in decision-making and vote on issues concerning the collective body. So these are things like the European Union, the UN, the WTO, basically where, you know, you've got all these nations that are kind of superseding their sovereignty in order to be a part of something that's bigger. Okay, now we're going to go to a presentation. This was by the Central Bank of Malaysia. It's probably presented at a World Bank conference. This is about what was that, 2 years old, September 21st, 2016, at the Global Symposium on Innovative Financial inclusion, and it's on digital fiat currency, DFC. So here they're telling us DFC is central bank issued, fiat currency, legal tender, sovereign denomination, true to the three tests of currency, a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. So essentially, this is paper money, really not that different from what we have today, from what I understand from looking at this presentation. It's just a few slides here. This is essentially a fiat bill that they can probably run through a high-speed scanner, tie it back to the blockchain to reduce some counterfeiting and so forth. Of course, not all of it's going to be fiat. I'm sure that's probably going to be, or not all of it's going to be paper. I'm sure that's going to be a very small percentage. Most of it will just be digits on a computer or now a blockchain. Okay, here they're just kind of showing you distribution and how it works. You can download these slides. They're over here. We're looking at this link right here, although I suspect that it's going to disappear sometime today, because if you look down here at the bottom, it's marked strictly confidential, do not distribute. And I'm going to go down here and show you. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you know that kind of my thought on what's coming later this year is we're going to have a two-tiered system. You have all of these criminal enterprises that we call governments operating to try and pull off the biggest heist that they can. There's zero trust there, despite what you see on TV. And they need a medium of exchange that is sound and secure, because if anybody in that group could just inflate the supply of currency, of money, of value, all of them would be doing it, and it would be worthless soon. Why wouldn't you try and steal the wealth of all the other countries by printing up more and selling it to them and taking their wealth? Of course you would. So that is why I think Ripple will be, or not Ripple, but XRP run on RippleNet will be at the top. And then underneath that, we will have digital fiat currencies, exactly what's in this slide, that they will try and foist on us. And of course, you've got all these sheeple out there that are just going to, well, the government's telling us, use new money, that's what we should use. And, most people are going to fall for this, sadly. There's some problems with that. Again, I promise I'm going to get to a video on that and go into detail. But I want you to look at this right here. What problems are we solving with a DFC? Number one right here, government and regulatory compliance enables central banks to sustainably perform core regulatory and monetary policy roles. Now, what is that? Well, typically they restrict and expand the money supply, which causes crashes and boom cycles in the economy. Those are not really natural things. That's due to federal or central bank interference in the marketplace, for the people that really understand it. And they're also, they need a currency, a blockchain-based currency that they control, that they can inflate and deflate at their whim. Because the government's not going to spend within their means anytime soon. They've been spending like drunken sailors for centuries. They're not suddenly going to go cold turkey and, okay, guys, this is it. We've turned a corner here. We're gonna get on the straight and narrow and live within our means. No, that is not happening, folks. So this is the shit fiat money that they're going to try and foist on all of us, while they use the sound money that is Ripple and XRP. Okay, now let's go to the big reveal here. DFC is not cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. It is not a private digital currency like Citicoin or Settlecoin. It is not a supranational currency. And in parentheses, they have Ripple and XRP. Now, what is supernatural? Well, we just talked about that. That's something that is above, multiple nations. And what example are they giving as that currency? Ripple and XRP. So what did they just tell us in this strictly confidential, do not distribute presentation? That Ripple and XRP are going to be the global standard.
So that was a great piece of information from To The Lifeboats. He is on Twitter. His name is Sam I Am. Unfortunately, he's actually blocked me on Twitter because I did accuse him of being the Ripple Riddler, which in my opinion he is. Fair play, you know, he's got a nice little bit of entertainment going on for him, but I think he just took it a little bit too personal. That I did call him out for being the two of the same, but nonetheless, the information he's just supplied there is next to none. It's actually quite credible that we've got a document that is issued from the World Bank from 2016. As you can see how I mean, that's a couple of years ago now. You can see exactly how long this type of master plan has actually been going on for, and as you can clearly see in those documents, it does list XRP as a supranational currency. Again, it will be the de facto reserve currency moving forwards into the future. And if you have been following Love for Crypto on Twitter ourselves, we've been absolutely hounding out this information, and people just aren't getting the actual grasp of the overall situation, and it's what has compelled me to make this documentary. Again, you can say it's as tinfoil hat as you want, or you could take a leap of faith and say it's potentially the greatest investment opportunity to ever be issued to anybody as a possibility. Exactly, take this information as what you do. You know, I am not a financial advisor in any way, shape or form. I'm just trying to piece information for the public who probably have got no understanding of exactly what is going on here. But for myself personally, I've not had my head out of the research books for a long fucking time now, and it just keeps getting, the more stones that I unturn, the more places I keep finding Ripple and XRP, and I quite frankly cannot get this scenario out of my head. You know, I may potentially need to get sent to a nut house by the end of this year because the amount of stuff that I'm getting put in my head now. And it's not that I'm just going out on a limb and just listening to people with naivety and taking in the information as the gospel truth. I'm actually going to credible sources, looking at documentation around, you know, the internet that is in the public domain, and I just, everywhere I go, it is pointing and leading to the same situation. I mean, this is just Ripple and XRP, but when you look on a geopolitical level outside of cryptocurrency and see exactly what's going on with the currency crisis, with hyperinflation, with the contagion spreading worldwide, you can see exactly why there is World Bank issued documents talking about what digital currencies are going to be in the future, and what XRP is being branded as is as a supranational currency. You can understand that the reserve status of the dollar and the inflation that has been created from it and the devaluation of the currency over time is a failed system, a failed monetary system that is due for a reset, which we have seen many times. It was the pound sterling before the US dollar, before it was the petrodollar status, it was the gold standard, before the gold standard it was the sterling, and over time we will see monetary resets, and this is being geared up to be the next one. And as you can see, the replacement is becoming more and more obvious, especially if you follow Ripple and XRP. It's becoming so much more obvious that XRP and it being the liquidity solution moving forwards into the future, the revolutionary financial instrument that it can be used for, its decentralized nature, its bias to no entity, unlike the US Reserve acting as a bias towards the US economy. It could be pressured by no government. So we have different governments around the world. We have China, who will not agree with the US, and the US who will not agree with the Russians, and the Russians who will not agree with the UK. So how do we find that level playing field that Donald Trump himself was even calling for? When we have no trust in the system, we need a trustless piece of technology where we can trust an algorithm of computer science rather than the government of a nation. And this is where XRP is so key to fit into the role as the world reserve currency, as a one world unit of account that is unmanipulated by nations, by governments. It is truly decentralized. Now, Bitcoin is not truly decentralized because it works a proof of work, which is giving initiative to mining companies to gain the overall hash power. As you can see, Bitmain currently has 57% hash rate of Bitcoin, meaning it can't elude what happens on that network. It can double spend, it can fork off. There's so many different scenarios that makes Bitcoin not decentralized to be a one world currency. It is untrue. But again, I need to stop with that, and I need to keep exactly on track. And obviously it's ushering in the one world currency, and the further and further along you get through this documentary, it'll just become so much more apparent, honestly. It really will. So just before we do move on to the next chapter of this documentary, we can see it's becoming apparent, and there are many nations calling for a change to the world reserve currency, removing the petrodollar status. We've had calls from Germany for a new payment system independent to SWIFT. We have calls from China, we have calls from Russia, who both want the reserve status being removed. It also appears to sound like Donald Trump himself is asking for this world status to be removed because it is hindering on the US economy now. Trade deficits are way beyond their means. The balance sheets need to be brought back. And the way things are going in the world right now, we just cannot see this happening anytime soon with the way things are. So going on to our next chapter, we are going to talk about the exact crisis that we will be facing very shortly. And I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight, although it cannot be ruled out to happen overnight. I strongly believe with the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, quantitative tightening, I believe by the back end of 2019 we can start seeing this grand scheme start unraveling and start coming to fruition. So this next clip, again, this is another segmented piece, various different news clips from various different mainstream media, and it is basically highlighting the current conditions that we are now facing geopolitically. And I think this will give you a nice little bit of oversight of exactly the truth of what is happening globally as we speak.
The Argentine peso crashed to record lows, and the new Bolivar has left millions of Venezuelans with worthless paper in their pockets.
The Argentine peso falling yet again after the country's central bank raised interest rates from 45% to 60%. They are Latin America's third largest economy. They are teetering on the edge of default as they struggle to repay debts from heavy government borrowing. The Argentine government has reportedly asked the IMF to release a $50 billion loan to the government early, ahead of schedule, so they can avoid default. Now, the peso has taken a dive to 39 pesos to $1 US. That's 45% against the greenback since the year began. And now over to Turkey's point, Argentina has the world's highest interest rates, and that still isn't enough to significantly improve market sentiment there.
You see a global financial crisis waiting on the other end?
You know, people are nervous. Look at Argentina and how interest rates have shot up because of strengthening rates in the US. And, you know, these things can spread very quickly.
This week, the US dollar was up another 4% over the Turkish lira, which overall has seen approximately a 40% depreciation since the start of 2018.
Turkey is now plagued with huge deficits, a collapsing currency, and a looming economic crisis, making it the next candidate for a European Union or Federal Reserve bailout. Turkey's combination of low interest rates, money creation, and massive government spending to stimulate the economy parallels the policies the U.S. government has pursued for the past 10 years. Without drastic changes in fiscal and monetary policies, economic trouble in America is around the corner.
And I think as the economy goes back into recession, and as it becomes obvious that we are going to lose the trade war, because we are right now benefiting from the subsidies that foreign economies are extending to us by allowing us to buy what they produce on credit. And when they stop doing that, it's Americans that are going to suffer. And I think the dollar is going to collapse.
Turkey now, America later.
After a little bit of a lull, the international currency crisis is back with a vengeance. Currencies are collapsing in Argentina, Brazil, India, Turkey, and other emerging markets, and central banks are springing into action. It is being hoped that the financial chaos can be confined to emerging markets so that it will not spread to the United States and Europe. But of course, the global financial system is more interconnected today than ever before. And a massive wave of debt defaults in emerging markets would inevitably have extremely serious consequences all over the planet. It would be difficult to overstate the potential danger that this new crisis poses for all of us. Emerging market economies went on an unprecedented debt binge over the past decade, and a high percentage of those debts were denominated in US dollars. As emerging market currencies collapse, it is going to become nearly impossible to service any debts denominated in US dollars. And that could ultimately mean absolutely enormous losses for international lenders. Our system tends to do fairly well as long as everybody is paying their debts. But once the dominoes begin to tumble, things can get messy really quickly. Let's start our roundup today with India. While India is currently not in as bad shape as some of the other emerging markets, the truth is that they could get there pretty rapidly if they keep going down this path. On Thursday, concerns about rising oil prices drove the Indian rupee to a brand new all-time record low. The Indian rupee fell to a record low on Thursday morning, following a declining trend all year, which economists attributed to rising oil prices, broader emerging market concerns, and strong month-end dollar demand. It slid to 70.8100 against the dollar after a previous new low just a day before at 70.475. That marked a 10.97% decline since the start of the year. But at least India is doing much better than Argentina. The Argentine peso collapsed to another all-time record low on Thursday, and at this point it has fallen more than 45% against the US dollar so far this year. The peso is down more than 45% against the greenback this year, exacerbating pre-existing fears over the country's weakening economy, while inflation is running at 25.4% this year. As Wolf Richter has noted, the Argentine peso was worth $1 in 2002. Today, it is worth 2.4 cents. That is what a collapse looks like. In a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding, the Argentine central bank raised interest rates to 60%. On Thursday, the central bank said it was increasing the amount of reserves that banks have to hold in a bid to tighten fiscal policy and shore up the currency. It hiked rates by 15 percentage points to 60% from 45% and promised not to lower them at least until December. Yes, I know that sounds like I'm reading a misprint, but it's not. Interest rates in Argentina have not been raised to 6%. They have been raised to 60%. Could you imagine what 60% interest rates would do to the U.S. economy?
But if you raise interest rates even a little bit, that's going to come crashing down.
Well, we will get there someday if we don't change our ways, because we are going down the exact same path that Argentina has gone. Things continue to get even worse in Turkey as well. The risks are fast multiplying in Turkey's beleaguered economy. In a clear sign of deterioration, Turkey's economic confidence index plunged 9% month-on-month to 83.9 points in August, its lowest since March 2009. The country's currency, the lira, resumed its downward spiral, and Moody's downgraded 20 financial institutions in Turkey. The financial nightmare in Turkey is the gift that keeps on giving. Their entire system is in the process of imploding, and President Erdogan seems to be in a persistent state of panic these days. Also on Thursday, the Brazilian central bank directly intervened in the market to keep their currency from plunging to another new all-time record low. The bloodbath in Argentina and Turkey is evident in Brazil, also where Bloomberg reports that the central bank just intervened for the first time since June 22nd. BCB reportedly intervened at 4:20, quote, to provide liquidity, unquote, adding that intervention, intensity and frequency will depend on the market. The BCB also attempted to provide some confidence by reaffirming that monetary policy is not directly linked to recent market shocks. A global financial crisis has begun, but because it has not really affected the United States too much yet, the mainstream media and most Americans aren't really paying any attention. But if the markets start crashing here too, then it will suddenly be all over the news. Most people are aware that most of the biggest stock market crashes in US history have happened in the fall. We have definitely entered a danger zone, and more shocks seem to hit the global economy with each passing day. For example, we just learned that President Trump apparently intends to follow through on his threat to hit the Chinese with another $200 billion in tariffs. Bloomberg reported Thursday that Trump had told aides that he wants to follow through on a threat to impose tariffs on another $200 billion worth of Chinese goods as early as next week. That would mean more than half of all Chinese imports would be subject to tariffs. The tariffs could go into effect after the public comment period ends on September the 6th. Of course, the Chinese will retaliate, and that will mean more disruption for the global economic system. Many people believe that the US economy is much stronger than it was in 2008, and that we will be able to easily weather any shocks that come along. Unfortunately, that is not true at all. The truth is that all of our long-term problems are much worse than they were in 2008, and the stage is definitely set for an economic disaster of unprecedented proportions.
So as you can see, the currency crisis worldwide is real. The contagion is spreading as we speak. Interest rates are spiraling out of control. It's becoming more relevant as the days go by just exactly how deep in trouble the US dollar really is. Although it may not seem apparent just yet, the contagion is spreading. We're all interconnected with each other, and the central bank dominoes are falling one by one. Now, if you remember, it was the central banks that bailed out the banks last time, but in this scenario, it will be the IMF to bail out the central banks. Now, if you can remember when I told you to keep to mind exactly what Christine Larange said on the last clip that I've shown you of her, should the circumstances arise that would facilitate the whole process. Now, if you can imagine the severity of exactly how bad this next financial crisis is going to be, then one could say it would be the perfect scenario to usher in a new world currency. I mean, let's face it, when this currency crisis has spread worldwide, has spread to the euro, The Euro central bank system has collapsed. The US dollar has been undermined as a reserve currency due to the epic fail that it will have caused on the entire political and geopolitical level, creating mayhem in the financial industry. Liquidity will be the real cause of failure. There will be no liquidity. Financial markets may possibly cease to trade. Stock markets worldwide will be closed and postponed. And this is the perfect scenario. This is the pre-planned crash that they wanted, that the elites have planned to do in order to make it that much apparent that we need the new world currency to be brought into effect. And when there is mayhem worldwide, markets have crashed, there is unrest within the citizens of every country. There will be UN meetings, G20 meetings. That will be high priority to get something put in place that can save mankind from going into a complete riot state. Then look no further, because it has already been planned. The destiny has already been chosen. And I believe that ICE 9 will be implemented during this event. Now, what I'm going to do is show you a little clip, because ICE 9 may not really mean anything to anybody, but for those who know what it is, then this will be an integral part of the master plan. I'm going to pass you over to this next clip, and he will explain exactly what the elites plan on doing.
In the medieval age, astronomers were trying to predict the movements of the planets and the stars, but their predictions were inconsistent. Sometimes they were right, and sometimes they were wrong. They kept updating their equations to correct for their past errors, but kept producing inconsistent results. Until Copernicus came along and said, in effect, "You're using the wrong model. The sun is at the center of the universe, not the Earth." With this new model, the stars aligned with our predictions. The story today is chillingly similar. The financial establishment is using outdated financial models like value at risk and the bell curve. Jim argues that the market actually resembles a complex system, with independent actors responding to market feedback and adjusting their behavior accordingly. Using this model, in 2007, Jim was able to see the 2008 crisis coming. And using this model again today, we're able to see that a massive financial crisis isn't looming, but is in the process of arriving. Unfortunately, complexity theory cannot tell us precisely when the next crisis will arrive, but it does tell us that the system is starting to wobble out of control. This is just like how a spinning top will begin to wobble with increased violence just before it spins out of control. And the evidence for this economic wobbling isn't hard to come by. On the one side, we have the natural pressures of deflation from technology, demographics, and deleveraging. On the other, we have the artificial pressures of inflation from the central banks fighting with interest rates, forward guidance, and of course, quantitative easing. And adding to all of this, amazingly, is a dollar shortage due to a slow but accelerating liquidation. While it's somewhat of a fool's errand to search for an exact trigger that will lead to a collapse, equivalent to searching for a single snowflake that will cause an avalanche, Jim Rickards points out a few of the most likely areas the trigger could come from, including the physical gold sector, various types of debt going bad, a geopolitical confrontation, or even just a bad natural disaster. So, what will happen when the trigger finally pushes the system to wobble out of control and causes a full-blown financial crisis? Well, don't worry. The financial and monetary elites have seen this crisis coming for a while, and they have a plan, which they have silently slid into the US legal code, what Jim Rickards refers to as ICE 9. But before we talk about ICE 9, let's talk about what the elites know. The elites know the current international monetary system is unsustainable, and that this recovery is artificial. When the next crisis arrives, they plan on using the shock doctrine, a tactic Jim explains in the book, to get the IMF's SDR to replace the dollar as the world's new reserve currency. In all likelihood, this crisis will be too massive to paper over. So what is the solution? ICE9. The ICE9 protocols will have the effect of locking you out from accessing your own cash. ICE9 can be applied to shutting down stock exchanges, preventing buying and selling, preventing you from accessing your money market account, limit how much cash you can withdraw from ATMs, or close them entirely. In short, ICE9 says, you can't have your money right now, we'll get back to you. In effect, shutting down almost anything financial. The goal of ICE9 is to freeze the system in place and buy time while the elites implement their plan for a new international monetary system. Then the system can be released from its lockdown state. As Jim documents, ICE9 isn't a theory, but is already set up and ready to be activated. Many of you may be thinking that this kind of stuff happens in Cyprus and Greece and other third world countries, but not here. But you'd be wrong. In fact, ICE9 used to be the default option for America, used in the panics of 1907, 1914, 1929, 1939, and 1971. In fact, it's only been since around the 70s that we've started injecting liquidity as the solution. So Jim Rickards asks the obvious question. Will ICE9 buy the elites enough time? With trust in government at fresh lows, how likely are people simply to accept ICE9 protocols? Will people riot demanding access to their money? And if they do, what would the government's response be to money riots after 16 years of militarized buildup from the War on Terror? Whatever it is, it's likely not going to be pretty.
I came away from all three meetings convinced of one thing. When the next crisis hits, the elites are planning to freeze the financial system, and they'll replace it with a new system, one not based on the U.S. dollar. When that happens, we'll wake up to a very strange and disturbing new reality.
And for our viewers that are watching today, what might their reality look like that morning? How does this manifest?
First, they'll have gone to bed knowing that a massive financial crisis was underway. But when they wake up, they'll find it has worsened and the contagion has spread worldwide. When they go to withdraw money, their ATM will say, closed temporarily. When they go to sell stocks, their account will say, transaction not available. When they go to their local business, that business will only accept cash if it's open. As citizens realize they're being barred from their money, riots will erupt. It's going to get really bad really quickly.
But how would such a freeze actually work? And wouldn't that be highly illegal?
Well, it wouldn't be illegal technically because they've been quietly laying the groundwork for years. They've rigged the financial laws, changed the rules of the game to allow this to happen. The stage is set. They have the levers in place. The lights are positioned. Now someone just needs to flick a switch and they'll impose ICE9 rapidly. And again, all of this will be legal because they've rigged the system in their favor. Here in the U.S., for example, Congress pushed through something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. This allows the government to freeze accounts, assets, even whole institutions at will. The only condition is that there's some threat to national security with a foreign connection. Of course, with a global market, every financial crisis has a foreign connection. Any systemic crisis fits the bill. And the thing is, when the next crisis hits, it's going to be so bad, President Trump won't have any choice but to go along with the elite's plan.
Wow. That is, you have to admit, that sounds somewhat hard to believe. Now, how could these operatives actually freeze a whole country's financial system?
Well, fortunately, we have some recent real-life examples to study. The elites have been conducting a series of dry runs for years, leading up to ICE9. Look at Cyprus, for example. A few years ago, the Cypriot economy was in trouble, especially the banks. The IMF stepped in and loaned Cyprus $10 billion, but the loan came with strings. Now pay attention because this is precisely what they're going to do. But imagine it on a global scale. So in exchange for the capital injection, the IMF demanded control over the Cypriot banking system. More specifically, the IMF froze the entire system, literally every bank in the country. And they did that to ensure the IMF's demands were met, including strict capital controls. So how did all of this impact regular citizens? Their local ATMs went dark. Even the bank branches closed, permanently in some cases. Citizens could not withdraw cash. They couldn't even transfer funds from one account to the other. What came next? Wealth extraction on a grand scale. The IMF basically stole 6 to 10% of all the cash in the Cypriot bank accounts. How did the elites justify this? They called it a levy, the price regular citizens had to pay for their government's missteps. Keep in mind, these asset confiscations were done at the balance sheet level with the institutions themselves. They never had to confiscate individual accounts. They froze every account by controlling a handful of the country's biggest banks. When the next crisis hits, we're going to see this here in the U.S. and around the world, and it'll be a highly coordinated global attack on the entire system simultaneously.
A very, very chilling statement. As you can see, the world's elite have already had this legislation set in place that allows ICE 9 to impose a complete financial standstill. The IMF have the power to do this. It will be the IMF that will basically implement ICE 9 if and when the economy comes to that melting point, when the worldwide debt bubble burst, the currency crisis and the contagion is spread worldwide. It is hindering on the US dollar for world trade to a point where it ceases to exist. Then ICE 9 will be the trigger that can end the suffering that will have been caused from the US dollar acting as the world reserve. And then obviously you can see that something will need to be done to prevent any more pain to the system. And again, it will be this point when the IMF and the G20 and the UN will all come together and they will need a new form of liquidity, because there will be no liquidity. Remember, liquidity will be the greatest, biggest downfall of this next financial crisis. It will be the fact that liquidity will cease to exist. Now, of course, the IMF are in bed with Ripple. Of course, the World Bank are calling XRP a supranational currency. Because when a meltdown like this does occur, who do you trust? Who can we trust to have a new reserve currency that we will need for global trade, that is not biased to any entity or to any nation or to any narrative? Of course, it will become more and more obvious for XRP to fulfill that role. Now again, I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight, although again, it cannot be ruled out to not happen overnight. But the reality of it is, I believe when XRP goes live this year, we will have until the end of 2019, leading into 2020, I think is when this bubble will finally burst. The debt crisis will become more apparent and more realistic. The currency contagion will spread worldwide. We will need something to come down and save us. We will need a gift from the gods, so to speak, to pull us out of the fucking shit that has occurred from the US dollar, from the negligence of the central banking system. And what a better time than to usher in XRP and to put it across to the United Nations, put it across to the G20, when XRP has acted as this new revolutionary source of liquidity that banks are using worldwide, that money providers are using worldwide, that has proven its ability to act as a reserve currency, that is scalable, that is immutable. Of course it will become apparent to the GN and to the UN at this point in time that the US dollar has failed and a new monetary system will be needed in order for world trade to commence, and it is thus ICE 9. And in the flick of a switch, it is that quick how XRP could potentially become the one world currency, the one world unit of account. Again, it seems far-fetched. I can understand. But clearly the elites are planning something. If they have passed ICE 9 into legislation, then they know themselves something is coming. They know themselves the monetary reset is about to happen. Now again, I of course, I'm just hoping by this point, when I talk about the elites, when I talk about shadow government and deep state and the IMF and the central banks and the Federal Reserve and Ripple, and how they've been spoke about highly from the World Bank and the IMF, how they're in fucking bed with the IMF. But what I'm actually trying to tell you is not that fairy tale dream that a lot of people like to shrug this off their fucking shoulders as. No, it is not. It is actually a death-defying fucking reality that is round the corner. So, keeping this documentary on cue, I'm going to pass you now over to somebody who I follow quite a lot. It's called Gregory Mannarino. He does a post and pre-market update daily, and does a post-market wrap-up on the Friday, and a market outlook for the week during the weekend. He's great. He's a straight shooting talking guy. Obviously, mainstream media have their own agenda, and it's hard to sometimes actually grasp what the reality of the situation is. And Gregory Mannarino, in my opinion, is an excellent subscription. Definitely worth following him, especially if you are, you know, keeping up to date with the geopolitical events that are happening around the world. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play you this short clip. And again, this is just about what is happening right now as we speak. You know, this clip isn't from too far away. He always puts a date there, so I'm sure you'll be able to grasp the date of when it was made. But again, the currency crisis, the debt crisis is real. So I'm going to pass you over to Gregory.
Hey everybody, it's me, Gregory Mannarino. How are you today? It's Friday, August 31st, 2018. Alright people, like I explained to you yesterday, this issue, it's now not an issue, it's a crisis. There is a currency crisis, and please do your own research about this. Don't take my word for a damn thing that I say. It's getting worse. We have all kinds of desperate measures being put in place to prop up this currency crisis that is unfolding. Now, I covered a lot of this yesterday, and I explained to you that we were going to see a few things happen. The knee-jerk into the dollar was going to continue. Well, that is going on right now. Dollar is stronger. I also explained to you, you were going to see cash rush into the bond market. Well, I don't want your eyeballs to explode. That's the truth, but there is a link in the description of this video which will take you to my website. Right side of the page under the chat room is the bond market chart. You can see this for yourself, a massive amount of cash flowing into the debt market. Think about this. I mean, these are desperate acts in my view. And some of this, no doubt, is being used to keep our stock market propped up, but it's the mechanism here. So, you know, again, as I am doing this video blog, the NASDAQ is higher, S&P 500 is flat, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down fractionally. A lot of effort is going to go into keeping our market propped up at this point here, but it's not the stock market that we need to be looking at. You all know that. I've been explaining to you since forever that you got to look at the bond market. It's the debt market that dictates everything now. Currencies are part of debt. They are units of debt, people. So this issue, which is now a crisis, has the potential to get much worse. We're going to start to see even more desperate acts by these governments to try to prop up their currencies, and more than likely they're going to need bailouts from who knows who. Could be from you. But to keep this scheme going, it's going to need a lot more capital, central bank intervention here, which is going to, again, strengthen the central bank's position because their product is debt. You all know that. Look, every single world leader right now, all of them, including our president, I know a lot of you getting offended every time I mention our president and what's going on here, but it's the truth, is doing the same things right now, supporting their central banks, having their central banks keep their foot to the floor to keep the illusion going. But again, we all understand there's going to be a point here where things are going to get ugly now. Just let me touch on this. Look at the banking sector right now here in the United States. As a matter of fact, let's go look over at Germany first. The German banks, as I am doing this, Deutsche Bank, of course you know that one especially, is under pressure. Well, it's not just Deutsche Bank. Bank of America, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all of them are under pressure right now. Now, why would that be? Maybe because of the currency crisis that we're seeing here? Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. But again, people are going to be distracted by everything that they can be distracted by. More rhetoric, more nonsense, more divisiveness. Look here, don't look here. Understand, the mainstream media channels, and I don't know how many of you watch them, they're not real. Everything that they put out there, these conflicts that they create in people's minds is a distraction. Both these parties, that, are two heads of the same snake, and they're not working for your benefit. Period. It never works out like that. We always get the short end of the stick. I'm talking about the middle class. You have to understand. Look, the people at the lower end of the spectrum, they're broke. They got no cash. They have basically no say-so in anything, and they cannot be sucked dry. The middle class, because they've already been sucked dry, the middle class has the bulk of the whatever wealth is not left in the 1%, but they want it. The 1% want it. And they're going to get it. They always do. Seriously, it's the same story throughout history, and that's what's going on here. It's a sad state of affairs. All right, look, before I go off the deep end any further here, the entire financial sector here in the United States and overseas is under pressure right now. It's because of this currency crisis. It's a debt crisis. Understand, currency, fiat currencies, these are units of debt, like I've been explaining forever. So we need to keep our eye on this. We're going to watch some very desperate things go on. I don't know if they're going to be able to contain it. I can promise you that efforts that we cannot even believe or think about is going to be instituted to try to stop it. But again, we've seen this before. This is a bubble, obviously. When bubbles burst, it's very rare for them to be reinflated. However, look what happened here in the United States. The Federal Reserve was successful, no doubt about it, in reinflating a housing bubble and a stock market bubble. But look at the effort. They had to explode their balance sheet, what we're able to see, okay, because a lot of stuff there is off balance sheet. And I talked about this yesterday in the video where I went off the deep end a little bit. They had to inflate the debt beyond anybody's imagination just to prop everything back up. It's always the same thing. Anyway, we'll cover more of this later at the market wrap up, and it's going to be lovely. See you then.
So as you can see, Gregory been involved in the markets for a long time. I'm not exactly trying to say I'm some market expert, but I genuinely like to believe that Greg Mannarino has enough, best way of putting it, experience behind him to be able to actually see through the markets and see what they actually represent. And again, follow him. He's a great follow, absolute fantastic follow. But as you can see, central banks around the world, they're all working in conjunction with each other. Obviously, this debt crisis has gotten way out of hand now, where it's come to the point of fact that the Federal Reserve are printing and they are pumping money into the US stock market, keeping it afloat. Again, remember, the world is in an entire bear market, especially if you're living in the United States. Everything's going to look green and rosy over there. The reality of it is, a lot of the unemployment figures are actually fake. Donald Trump himself even called out these numbers to be fake when he was president, when he was the candidate, obviously going into the election. But now he's president, he wants to use those exact same figures that he once called out bullshit, basically. So you can see, there's massive efforts from central banks, from the Federal Reserve, to keep this bubble inflated. Again, the resources and capital that are going into this is extraordinary. The way that they've actually kept and reinflated that bubble from happening last time is extraordinary. But again, I think it's all part by design. It's all an end game dream for the elites. And as you can see, the elites are the 1%. They want to keep hold of it. They want to keep hold of the power, the monetary system. And I think the US dollar is, I'm not saying that fiat is going to die. I know for a fact that fiat will still be present for a long time. But what I'm trying to say is the global unit of account that will be used for trade, for Forex. Listen, the US dollar is, as far as I'm aware, and from the research I've done, is on its final last days, acting as the de facto global reserve. I think all the world leaders, behind the doors, have already spoken about this. I think they can see the upcoming crisis themselves. They'd be absolutely blinded to not be able to see it, especially when the Federal Reserve are pumping out all this money, and it's not going to the likes of me and you, the working class or the middle class. It's going straight into corporate America, pumping up corporate America. That's the only beneficiary of this monetary policy that is going on at the moment. But again, interest rates will rise. Money will have to come back to the Fed, back to the central banks. Liquidity will be the real driver. It will be non-fucking existent, believe me, when this happens. And again, I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. I'm not saying that at all. A crisis usually unfolds over a couple of years, but the dominoes are definitely 100% falling. And again, this isn't something that can continue for another 3 to 4 or 5 years. The implications of what's happening, I'm really putting it towards the back end of 2019 with the Fed monetary policy and the rate hikes that will commence from it. It will be unsustainable to keep pumping money into this deceptional bubble that we see today. It is the reality of the situation, believe me. And again, Ripple XRP, where do they fit into it? Obviously, let's talk about the SDR basket. I did say I'd fall back onto it. I think this is an appropriate time for it. There's lots of discussion on Twitter from saying it won't replace the SDR basket. It might not. Listen, the whole point of what I'm trying to say to you, the SDR basket was designed for one thing and one thing only. And below, you can now see a CIA documentation of the SDR, and it clearly states in there it is to provide liquidity in disastrous moments, i.e. financial meltdowns, i.e. debt crisis, i.e. currency meltdown contagion that is spread worldwide. An SDR basket is used to aid liquidity in these situations. Now, ask yourself, what is XRP doing? Is it not a source of liquidity that is independent from any entity? It is immutable. It can't be controlled by any nation or government. Is that not a fair level playing field that Donald Trump earlier said? Listen, this, again, I may be wrong. This is a conspiracy. This is my own opinion. This isn't the gospel truth. I just find it highly, highly suspicious how how the stars were aligning in this entire development, going as far back as 2008 from the origin of crypto and blockchain, ushering it in, getting the people familiar with it. It's all by design as far as I am aware. Again, with the SDR basket, it was here to aid liquidity. Now listen, the definition of the SDR basket, at one point it was gold denominated. Now it's a basket of currencies. How can we provide liquidity through an SDR basket of currencies that are failing worldwide? It does not make no sense whatsoever. Now, is this going to be the evolution of the SDR basket? Is that what XRP's key role in society will play moving forward? Nobody knows. But one thing is for certain. SDR basket was created to aid liquidity in financial crises. Again, the design of XRPL is a source of liquidity. It is a financial fucking revolution. That is undeniable. Whether this NDO stuff suits your agenda or not, whether it's complete nonsense, the reality of it is Ripple and XRP are in bed with every fucking Rothschild establishment you can put your fucking finger on. Rothschild are in control of all the central banks of the world, yet you find yourself with Ripple working with 40 to 50 of them. You've got the Federal Reserve the Faster Payments Task Force, and who sat on that board? It is Ripple. It's Ripple technology that will be voted in. We have the same with the Bank of England test as far back as 2015 as a proof of concept using Ripple technology. We've got Chris Larsen sat on the high advisory board of the fucking IMF people. Now listen, I could continuously keep putting links with Ripple, with Deep State, with the elites. Listen, just because, it's for another entire video, that it really is. The matter of the fact of what I am saying is, liquidity is going to be a big, massive problem when this crisis happens. We're going to have a currency meltdown. We're going to need to source liquidity from somewhere in order for trade to stay alive. in order for markets to continue to function. Now, again, obviously, this isn't going to happen overnight. My prediction of this happening is Q4 2019, and at the very latest Q2 2020, that all this will come to fruition. In respect of the markets crashing 100%, I think by this time, XRPL will have established itself as a form of currency, and I think we will see a lot of global trade running through XRPL at this point, whether that be in banking institutions, money providers. Listen, we're going to have Rapid live. We're going to have real utility of XRP acting as a bridge currency. You know, this is a good 18 months away, 24 months at the most. Now, by this point, it could have established itself as a currency. Exactly what Kenneth Story was saying earlier on. We need diminishing use of the US dollar and increased usage of another form of currency. Now, listen, just because it's not apparent just this moment in time does not mean to say that it won't happen. And if you follow Ripple and XRP, and if you believe that this is the revolutionary financial asset that will change the fucking life of millennium, is what it will do. It is designed, and in my opinion, it is well suited to become the next monetary reset. You know, listen, we're doing collaboration with the central banks, with major banking institutions worldwide, with the Federal Reserve, with the Bank of England, with the ECB, with the IMF. We've heard the World Bank talk about them as a supranational currency. I mean, look, a supranational currency in itself, you've heard the definition of what that means. I mean, come on, is this not fucking crystal clear, ladies and gentlemen? Now, what I'm doing here today is foreseeing a future financial crisis where ICE 9 will be implemented, where the IMF will have no choice but to implement a new monetary system, which will need to be agreed upon by the G20, by the United Nations. And by this point, will it not become that much more apparent that XRP and its decentralised nature to act as a reserve currency is not so fucking far-fetched after all, ladies and gentlemen? Let's just embrace that moment there, you know, because that is a very actual reality. You know, your JC Collins, this Galatron, who are even calling that XRP can become a world currency. Whether it becomes an SDR, whether it replaces the SDR, whether it gets added to the SDR, it is irrelevant. The future of XRPL is crystal fucking clear. Now, at this point of the documentary, and you know, we're pretty much there. I'd like to think I've pretty much covered everything as much as I can. On a basic level, just remember that I've had to compress this into, I mean, what has been a long documentary, but the information just continues and is easily accessible by the public. Now, again, obviously, if you really want to go deep into how, the elites work, the shadow government, the NWO, then you've got obviously who we spoke about earlier on, the CIA operative, Kevin Shipp. He's got 8 hours worth of this information on his YouTube channel. And as I say, this isn't even related to cryptocurrencies as such, but it just goes to show the actual depth of the powers that be. It shows exactly, listen, who they are is probably the best way of putting it. You know, it's undeniable the power and control of the elite and how long they've gained control over monetary policies. And just ask yourself, Rothschild, obviously, they own all the central banks in the world. They're basically in control of the monetary policy and the direction of where it goes. If XRP was to be a threat to it, then it would not exist. Just remember that. You would not see it today. It would cease to exist. Now, obviously, we've seen partnering with every fucking establishment within Rothschild power and control, which tells you only one thing. Either 1, it was created by them, or 2, they have been bought by them. The same way that Google got bought, the same way that Amazon got bought, the elites use these new technologies as weapons for their own agenda. Just remember that. Exactly as Kevin Shipp was saying, we have Google Earth. The satellites that go around the Earth that created the model of Google Earth are in conjunction with Secret Service. It is a weapon that they have at their disposal. Just remember that. The same way that they want financial enslavement. And when I say financial enslavement, it might come across as a little bit harsh. I do understand that. And I can understand that it can be a scary thought. But listen, the same way that SWIFT was used to enforce people like Iran and Russia and Iraq out of the financial system, it will be used in the exact same way. Now, yes, XRP is decentralized, meaning it's a trustless system. But believe me, to get in and out of the realm, it is guarded by centralisation, guarded by KYC, guarded by AML. If you want to get into XRP, you have to pass through a centralised gateway to go into the decentralised nature of the world, and it's that straightforward. Yeah, the technology is decentralised, but believe me, if you are cash out your XRP, you are being KYC'd, and you are going through AML, monetary fucking laws, and it's that simple. It is that simple. Okay, nations will not need to trust each other. They will not need to trust the XRPL. They won't need to because they're trusting an algorithm. They trust in maths and they trust in science. Again, you know, there's information available at your disposal. You just need to look in the right places. Now, at this point in the documentary, I'm in, you know, I'd like to think I'm in quite close relationship with Rachel Lee on Twitter. I've basically put an illustration up in front of you where you can get her Twitter handle. She is an absolutely undeniable source of information. She digs so deep, it is incomprehensible. In fact, I owe a lot to her in helping myself envision what I have been talking about today. And as I said, if you want information on this, believe me, you need to follow Rachel Lee. Now, on top of that, there is other people. There's Hooded Suburban. Again, I'm going to show you the Twitter handle so you can follow them all. You've got Demore. You've also got Marie St. Pierre. Now, as a small group, we have been discussing this in depth within a WhatsApp group. And I'd like to thank those individuals personally as well, because I believe it's been a full team effort, this documentary, although it's been myself that's been the narrator. The discussions, the in-depth, the information, the documentation that we've been sharing and speaking to each other. There's not a lot of like-minded people out there that can go into the depth of what we're talking about without being ridiculed for it. Exactly, the exact reason why this documentary has been made in the first place. So I'd like to give them all a special thanks on my behalf for making this reality become true, because, look, as far-fetched as it may seem, I'd like you to think by this point that, you know, there is a possibility of it actually unfolding in this way. It's not just complete bullshit. You know, I'm not just making this stuff up. And again, you know, it is only my opinion. This is definitely not financial advice, but again, this could potentially be the greatest investment opportunity to ever be put forward to you as a person. The success of XRPL is undeniable regardless. There is no two ways about that. But don't be limited by your own vision. The limitations of this technology can go way beyond your wildest dreams. And again, for it to act as a world reserve currency is not as far-fetched as one may see. Now, again, thank you for your patience with this documentation and for the facts and the findings that I have put forward to you today. I'd like to thank you, especially if you're at this point of the video. It's meaning you have watched every single last bit of it, so thank you for your patience. Understand it's been a long video. If you'd like to show this channel support, in the description there is an XRP donation address and tag if you would like to show some support. And yeah, just thanks a lot. Thanks for the support throughout the channel through time. Obviously we disappeared off the scene because obviously YouTube have got this agenda against us personally. Actually sort of makes a little bit of sense when you think about the stuff that we're talking about. But again, thank you very much for everything, and I'm going to leave you with this last final bit of podcast just so you can soak up everything that I've said. And remember, like I say, in regards to people who are speaking about the economy, you know, economists, reputable people who talk about the crash and it's happening, they all miss one thing, and it is the key. It's XRPL, and it is the monetary reset, and what will follow is the $1 million question. And I'd like to say today, ladies and gentlemen, I've given you that foresight of the future. But again, I will leave you with this podcast, which will gauge exactly how fucked up the economy is. Thank you for watching Love for Crypto. It's been our pleasure to give you this one world currency video. And just remember, if you did watch our previous one world currency video, then the same applies to this. It will power the world's economic infrastructure like the Terminator on fucking steroids.
Many people out there saying that he was, created by the central bankers, and now he is in office. Where does the EU stand? Just like you mentioned, gold, precious metals. Where are we headed now since he won?
Well, I wrote that kind of a provocative title because, of course, Marine Le Pen was theoretically better because if she won, it would have been a Brexit times 100. And right now we'd actually be, the powers that be would have been overwhelmed. The gold cartel would have been destroyed. The PPT would have been destroyed. And we actually would have had as I call it, the most overdue financial crisis in history this morning. So yes, in the short term, it certainly would have been better for precious metals if she had won. But in the bigger picture, ultimately we're going to get to the same place because it doesn't matter who's in charge, whether it's Donald Trump here or Emmanuel Macron there. The financial problems have to do with debt, and that debt has to default no matter who's in charge. So the fact that in the short term, in the long term, what's best for France would have been Marine Le Pen winning because she would have stopped their participation in the European Union, kind of like what's happened with the Brexit. But instead, it's empowered the ECB to continue to destroy Europe at an unabashed pace. And frankly, this Macron guy, I'm not going to go into all his credentials. I've written exhaustively about how he's the worst imaginable candidate. He's like a mini-me of Francois Hollande, except one with absolutely no experience. And as you said, he was obviously groomed because he was just taken out of obscurity and thrown into Rothschild Bank of all places. And then all of a sudden, he's the economics minister under the most unsuccessful, lowest approval rating presidency in history. And next thing you know, he's getting 2/3 of the vote. And what I wrote this morning was, let's face it, the reason why the French people voted this guy in was because they were scared. They were scared there was going to be a collapse today if they voted her in. And that's exactly what have happened. But in the meantime, they put this guy in place who is going to continue with the very policies that has put France and the entire European Union at the abyss. And he's pro-Europe, he's pro-ECB, he's pro-immigration policy. These are the things that led to the rise of an independent party like En Marche and led to the rise of the National Front for the first time in history, prevented the equivalent of the Democrats and Republicans in France from actually getting to the final round of the election. Now we, by the way, have parliamentary elections next month in France, which will be, split between 4 parties. So it's going to be a complete mess there. And I believe that the euro will resume its plunge to parity with the dollar. And all of the issues in Europe will only get worse. And now the ECB has been given kind of a mandate to continue destroying Europe as it has been. So it's only put off the day of reckoning.
Now, you mentioned gold, precious metals, and we see that gold and silver, they've been hovering. They've been pushed down a little bit, but they've been hovering. Gold has been hovering around $1,200 range or so. But Bitcoin, for some reason, has been surging lately. What's your take on why Bitcoin all of a sudden has taken off?
Right. Well, first, let's talk about the precious metal part, because I think you're vastly understating to say they're down a bit and they've been hovering. Silver has been down now 16 days in a row. And the reason it's been down 16 days in a row is because of the all-time high cartel short position. The commercials at the COMEX. The highest they've ever had. And the only other time they've had a position even close to this high was right after the Brexit, when you had an actual crisis and they were terrified of price taking off. Here you didn't have an actual crisis and they did this. And actually they started covering last week. We saw I think it was like the second largest short covering in any week in the last 15 years. So they're on their way to covering the shorts. And, I'm guessing silver's bottomed here, not to mention because the whole mining business is falling apart and at these levels and no one is selling actual silver. And, the physical buying, I'm sure, is, Andrew McGuire is talking about how strong it's been. So this is a typical thing. But what I saw in precious metals was, and I've been writing about this, exactly what happened at the time of the Swiss referendum for the Save Our Swiss Gold back at the end of 2014. They just violently smashed the price for the weeks leading up to it because they didn't want the Swiss people to believe that gold was a good thing. And then as soon as and in fact, they spent that whole time, led by the head of the S&B, Thomas Jordan, saying, you can't vote yes on this referendum because we need all the flexibility we can get so we can maintain our Swiss franc peg with the euro. And sure enough, the second that referendum came through, precious metals bottomed that day, took off, and 3 weeks later they abandoned the peg. And I think the same thing was going on here. I think that the powers that be did not want the populace of France believing that there was a momentum for Marine Le Pen victory, and that's why they were holding the price down. And now they're going to start covering their shorts. So there was nothing hovering and epic. The other part of where precious metals were that was scaring them was, and I've written about this ad nauseum also, is both of them had passed their 200 day, 200 week moving averages. In gold's case, it's about 1239, so it's very close. In silver's, though, it was like 1720 or something. So it's been knocked off it. But they were terrified of those prices being held, and particularly gold's 5.5-year downtrend line, starting with the attacks of September 2011 when it was at its high at 1285 or 1290. That's when that downtrend line would have been broken, and that's why it's no coincidence that right at that level they started pushing the price down with these incredible attacks, unlike just about anything I've ever seen. So yes, that's what was going on in that market. And now that this election is over and you see the short covering has started, particularly in silver, I'm guessing that you're going to see the prices start to move back up, particularly because nothing has been fixed. They had an election in France, big deal. They voted in the same kind of person who's made all the problems in the first place. So that's that. Now, as for Bitcoin, anyone who's following the sector knows that I am the only person in the sector who has talked about Bitcoin for the past year. Yes, Big Swear has talked about it, but he's not in the bullion industry. But I have been as bullish on it as anyone because I believe, as I wrote a year ago in my Bitcoin and precious metals, twin destroyers of the fiat regime, that it is being, it is being realized as a store of value, just as gold and silver has, albeit without 5,000 years of history. But more importantly, I think what's going on right now is the world is realizing that the fiat system, the fiat currency system, has destroyed it. And I've said that the only other thing that's destroyed more lives in history other than fiat currency has been religious crusades. And right now it's at the point where when this, as I call it, the largest, most destructive fiat Ponzi scheme in history implodes, which it will now really accelerate on imploding now that Emmanuel Macron has kept France and the ECB in the game. I think people are going to realize that the future of money is one where governments are not trusted to print it. It's going to be decentralized. And that's why it's not just Bitcoin. The entire cryptocurrency space is exploding. And I think that it won't take long before the system really does destroy itself. And you're going to see more and more money flood into cryptocurrency because people don't trust governments anymore, which is going to, probably deflect a lot of the government's manipulative attentions from precious metals, where, they're already running out of physical anyway, toward cryptocurrency, which is going to help precious metal prices go up, because ultimately gold and silver are not, utilitarian money. They are stores of value. That's what they've been for 5,000 years, and that's what they're going to be for thousands of years more. So I think that, the rise of Bitcoin is symbolizing a change in the monetary regime unlike any we've seen for centuries. And it's going to help gold and silver because ultimately both of them are fighting the same fight against the evils of fiat currency, which are destroying themselves at a pace never seen before in history.
Andy, do you think the central banks, do you think they want to take control over the cryptocurrency market?
Sure, they'd love to. The problem is they can't. That's my whole point, Dave. They will realize quickly. I mean, remember, look, back in January, early January, when you had the Chinese yuan was devaluing and almost went above 7, to the dollar, 7 yuan to the dollar. And there was a flight of capital. I mean, look, $1 trillion has left China in the last 2 years. And so China instituted massive capital controls, and they essentially shut down the Bitcoin exchanges. I mean, they left them open, but since early January, you have not been allowed to withdraw Bitcoin from a Chinese exchange because they say it's money laundering, because they're scared that people are going to buy Bitcoin and then just, send it to themselves outside of the country like capital flight. And so they thought that would slow down Bitcoin. And what has Bitcoin done since? It's close to doubled, and all the other cryptos have more than doubled, because people are realizing that you can buy Bitcoin in other ways. You can go to localbitcoins.com. There's tons of different ways you could buy it outside the exchanges. So while the price of Bitcoin on Chinese exchanges is much lower than in other places, the price of the black market is much higher, and it will continue to go higher. So again, governments are keystone cops, central banks and governments, when it comes to monetary regulation in the first place, but they don't even have a clue how cryptocurrency works. So their efforts to stop it are going to be laughable. I mean, again, it took 2 months before the whole Chinese thing, which was pretty draconian, blew over. I mean, it's going to be a time, I don't know, when you have the slightest bit of crisis here, when the PPT loses a little bit of control and commodities fall or stocks fall, they'll shut down Coinbase. They'll shut down the U.S. exchanges. They'll say it's money laundering, and the price will dip for a bit. And then right away, people start buying in other places, because the point is the governments can't control it. They'll even say that we're going to start our own cryptocurrency, but that's not a cryptocurrency. That's simply the government creating their own fiat currency, just, in electronic version. So the point is they're going to fight to the death, just like they fought to the death with gold and silver, but they're going to lose both wars. In the case of precious metals, they're going to lose the war to hold the price down. In the case of cryptocurrency, they're going to lose the war to control money. I mean, there will be a new paradigm, and believe me, that looming crisis, the follow-up to 2008, which can't be reversed, will end everything. It will end the fiat currency regime worldwide. And, it could come a lot sooner than anyone imagines.
Now, I wanted to turn to the economy here in the United States. Right now, the U.S. government, they approved a $1 trillion budget. It'll bring them up to September 30th, and we're in trouble again. We have the debt ceiling problem. Where are we headed with this? I mean, does this make any sense to you whatsoever, what Trump is doing right now?
Well, forgetting Trump for a second, look, the U.S. economy is at its singular worst point in our lifetimes, except for a handful of weeks in the middle of the 2008 crisis, and a handful of weeks right after 9/11, when it was kind of a deer in headlights where business stopped. Otherwise, quantifiably, we are by far, it's not even close. The level of business activity is so far below where we were at the bottom of 2008 everywhere. It's not even distinguishable, let alone the debt. We've doubled our debt since that time to get to this level, so which should show you where we stand, let alone what's going on in the rest of the world, where it's no better. In many cases, it's actually worse. So yeah, we're in the worst case we've been. We've taken interest rates down to zero, and around the world, some places it's negative. With all that debt, we have massive oversupply of pretty much all industrial commodities. Oil is the perfect example. I've been talking forever about this is the historic glut, and the OPEC production deal was a big lie, and it's falling apart right now, and that's going to cause major debt defaults. Now you've had, in the wake of the equity bubble in 2000 and the real estate bubble in 2008, we have subprime auto loan and student loan and echo real estate bubbles that are all falling apart, and the Chinese credit bubble. I mean, this morning in Canada, you have Home Capital Group, which is like the Countrywide of Canada, is about to collapse. And I mean, this is just symptomatic of what's going on around the world. So there's nothing we could do. And as far as what Trump's doing, look, I pushed as hard as I could to get him to win, simply because Hillary Clinton was the worst of two evils. But there's nothing he could do. And we found out already that there's nothing he can get done. Even if this supposed repeal and replace of Obamacare gets passed, which doesn't sound like it's going to by the Senate, it's not a repeal and replace. Yeah, it's a repeal, but it's a replacement with the same thing. We are the socialist states of America, and that's not going to change. And all his tax cuts, if they were going to happen, and I doubt that they have a chance of happening, it's just going to make these deficits worse and push interest rates higher. The interest on the national debt went above $500 billion a year for the first time last month. And this is with interest rates pretty close to 5,000-year lows for the world and historic lows for this nation. So there's nothing he can do. Good for him for trying, but he's just being a politician, and it's not going to change the laws of economic Mother Nature. So I expect that if we're not in official recession already, when they downwardly revise this first quarter number, we will be by the end of this year, because the forces of economic destruction are only getting stronger. And believe me, if you see the oil price go down below $40 per barrel, forget it. It's all over for the entire world. So I expect the economy to dramatically weaken, and I mean dramatically weaken in the coming quarters. And I expect that there's nothing that any politician around the world, let alone the youngest politician in French history, to ever be the president to do anything about it.
So you mentioned the economy just really getting worse and worse as we move along here. And we know this retail is contracting. Everything is contracting. In the first quarter GDP, I mean, it was 0.7%. That's the manipulated number that they throw at us. And during this period of time, the Fed is raising interest rates. They didn't raise it this last May, but Fed Williams is out there saying that we are at full employment. It looks fantastic. We're way above our potential, and we are still on track to raise interest rates in June and 2 other times. I mean, why are they doing this into such a weak economy?
Well, of course they're lying, because even the Fed guys are not.
What? They're lying?
Yeah. Even the Fed guys are not stupid enough to believe the economy's growing or that we're at full employment. Look, Janet Yellen herself has talked about the labor slack and the labor participation rate, so she knows. They're trying to instill confidence. Look, I don't agree with a lot of stuff Jim Rickard says, but he's, his description of why they're doing it is, well, one, they're trying to create ammunition so they can cut rates next time, and or Peter Schiff has said the same thing. They want to instill confidence. It's a con game, and all you have to do is say, yeah, we're changing our mind. We've spent the last 3 years saying we're going to tighten policy and things are getting better, but we're changing our mind. Things are getting worse, and the market crashes. So they have to keep lying to the point where it's almost laughable. And now the economic data is becoming even more laughable to talk about how we're at full employment when, as you say, we're in the middle of a retail Armageddon. And, by the way, the only sector in this country, there's only 2 sectors in this country that have had positive job growth since the 2008 crisis. One of them is waiters and bartenders. And now that you have this retail Armageddon, let alone the restaurant index itself is just in free fall. To say that there's more waiters and bartenders coming on, and they're all part-time minimum wage anyway, is laughable. And then the other one is energy production. Well, if oil prices are plunging now, energy production is going to fall too. There's no other avenues of growth other than maybe like healthcare workers, which don't produce anything. They just are a negative productivity to the nation at large. So they know that. They're just trying to instill confidence that's misplaced, because everyone knows in the real world that the real world's falling apart. Look, the only thing the Fed cares about is the stock market, okay? Nothing else. They are bankers, and it's a con game, and Keynesians care about, the wealth effect and making people believe that things are well. And that's why the market has been manipulated every second of every day for the past 5 years, but particularly since the election, when, they were dealt a blow today. They thought they had everything in control. And then when Trump won, they had to really step it up to the point where the rigging of gold and silver and stocks, as I said last week, we have .com valuations in a Great Depression era. That's where we stand. So, everything's falling apart. And as long as the stock market has been going to .com levels, they feel like, yeah, we can get away with a quarter point rate hike here, quarter point there. Point is, they're still below 1%. I mean, below 1%. We weren't below 1% after the whole 2000 .com bubble, and we still haven't increased, reduced the balance sheet, and never will. So again, they're just trying to buy as much time as they can, because ultimately they're going to have to do QE4, and they'll take rates down to 0. And when they do that, then that will have the same impact on the gold market and as Marine Le Pen winning. And I think it's going to be this year, because the whole economy of the world is falling apart right now.
So you mentioned oil a little while back here, and you said if it's below $40 a barrel, we're in a recession. Now, many people say if it was below $50 a barrel, we'd be in a recession. So, I mean, are we in a recession right now?
No, I didn't say it would be below under $40, we'd be in a recession. I said under $40, you'd have a cataclysmic debt default. It'll be bigger than the mortgage defaults. It'll be bigger than the mortgage defaults of 2008. I mean, look what happened a year ago. It was only a year ago when oil prices were down to $25 a barrel, and look at what the high yield bonds were doing. They were collapsing, and all the commodity currencies were in free fall. and that's what will happen again. I mean, Saudi Arabia will go bankrupt. I mean, that's why they want to take Saudi Aramco public for $100 billion, because they're hemorrhaging money right now. So we're already in a recession. But if we go below $40 a barrel, I mean, we'll be in a depression, because all the energy companies will be mass default, and that's going to happen. It's not just energy. I mean, I'm looking at the CRB index, which has been, I mean, it's still well below. It's 30 or 40% below where it was 2 or 3 years ago when I wrote my direst prediction of all article saying that commodities would crash. But it's been supported at about this 180 level for the past year or so, mainly because of the oil PPT, which was created last year when oil was $25 a barrel to jawbone and create fake oil OPEC production deals that never happened, just to try to keep the price up. But now the CRB has plunged below 180, and I think you're going to see a real major decline in commodities in the coming months as the economy falls apart. And then all pretense of trying to pretend that was a strong economy, let alone with full employment, are going to be gone.
So you wrote an article I saw on May 5th, Global Economic Disaster Dead Ahead. And this is what we've been talking about right now, where we're heading towards this huge crash of the economy. And when we reach that point, I mean, are there any signs that you're looking at? I mean, one, you said there was oil. Are you looking at anything else to give you a heads up that we're getting closer, or everything's about to fall apart?
Well, you don't need to look at one thing, because there's so many things going on. I mean, one thing is, of course, interest rates, which, despite all the hype, are just sitting in the middle of this trading range. Well, I mean, look, the 10-year peaked at 2.6 right after the election. It's like 2.35 today. It's going nowhere. The rates can't go up because the economy will collapse if they do. Commodities is a major thing to look at. I mean, we're talking about, it's not just oil. I mean, look at now Dr. Copper is plunging, and most of the agriculturals are plunging, and corporate earnings have been down for, aside from some accounting gimmicks, particularly at some of the larger companies, 7 quarters in a row, and they're going down. GDP was just pretty much zero, and it was barely above that in the fourth quarter. And it's so, and look what's going on around the world. It's no different there. And now that the election is over in France, and we could stop with this pretense of, if Macron wins, the euro is going to be strong. No, Macron wins, the euro is going to weaken again. I mean, it's down today, and you'll see it'll start bleeding back down to a dollar parity in the coming months, because the euro is toast. The euro is in far worse shape than the dollar, because it's, the European Union is going to fall apart. And so again, I'm looking at a million signs, and look at the political things going on around the world. I mean, people aren't happy. So, and God forbid we start a war with like North Korea or something. So plenty of things to look at. None of them good that I see. As I call it every day, PIMB, precious metal bullish, everything else bearish.
So, Andy, when these bubbles start to pop and things start to really go south, and the central bank, they step in and they start creating stimulus once again, what can people expect to happen? I mean, will we see incredible inflation? Will, the stock market, I'm sure they'll try to pump that right back up. But what else will people experience? Are we going to have huge job losses? I mean, will the central bank, I guess my question is, will the central bank be able to stop this entire system coming down?
Well, it's funny because you're saying, when things get bad and the central banks start to, print money again. The thing is, and everyone should read my Macron or Le Pen, who's more bullish for precious metals article today. I mean, it's 8 pages long, and I'm showing, this very month was the all-time high in the history of central banks for monetization. We're at like $250 billion a month right now. Mostly the Bank of Japan and the ECB, but, others are in there as well. So we're already at the highest level of overt, not including covert, overt monetization in the history of mankind. And yet we're talking about what's going to happen when they really start to increase the money printing. And of course, you're referring to the Fed. Yes. What will we see? Look, part of inflation is, when you talk about stock market, is the PPT. So it's not just like money flowing into the market. It's called them printing money and buying the stock market. I mean, look, and everyone's got to read this article right today. I'm showing how now the Swiss have admitted that they have bought like $90 billion of U.S. stocks alone in the last 2 years. And, we talk about how the NASDAQ like 40% of the NASDAQ is the 5 biggest stocks, and like 40% of the gains in the NASDAQ in the last year are due to those 5 stocks. Apple and Facebook and Google and Microsoft. And guess what the 5 biggest holdings of the Swiss National Bank are? Those 5 stocks. So it's central banks that are making the stocks markets go up. There's no doubt the Fed has been doing it. I mean, that's what the dead ringer algorithm I've been talking about for years. The stock market bottoms every day at 10 a.m., which happens to be when the Fed does its open market operations. And now you have banks like the Bank of Japan and Switzerland admitting that they're buying stocks. In fact, I couldn't believe this, and I wrote about this today also. The Bank of Japan's balance sheet is $4.4 trillion. So it's the same amount as the Fed's balance sheet, even though they have a third of the population and a quarter of the GDP. And yes, I know the Fed buys tons of stocks and bonds covertly, but the fact is that there's that much monetization going on. And at least the Japanese and Swiss admit that they're buying stocks. So how much more can they buy? And what will be the impact when things get really going? Well, you're definitely going to see the cost of living rise. That's a given, because you always will see need versus want items go up in value, and that hasn't changed at all, despite all the deflation that we're warned about. The cost of living continues to go up, and I can guarantee you the cost of living will rise in perfect correlation with that money printing, and I also that the price of precious metals will rise because the cartel will be overwhelmed by physical demand. And as for the stock market, I'm not sure if it'll go up in nominal terms. It may hyperinflate like Venezuela did, but in real terms, you're going to lose in financial assets, which have never been more overvalued in history.
How should people prepare for this? What's your advice that you would give someone where they're just looking at this and they're hearing what we're saying? What would you tell them to do at this point to get prepared for what is about to happen?
Well, I'd say, hey, get your head out of the sand if it isn't already, and realize that what you're seeing in your daily life and what people that you know are seeing is real, and it's not getting better. And if you're talking about financially, look, I mean, I give financial, I'm a financial expert, and, I work for a precious metal bullion firm, and I hold all not all, I held a lot of Bitcoin now too, but precious metals is, the best way to protect yourself from inflation throughout history. And I think that you need to start thinking about these things quickly, because if you're holding all your assets in the most historically overvalued and propped up financial assets of all time, you are going to have some historic real losses in the coming years. It's just a matter of when.
Andy, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight.